Good morning, everybody. Super excited. Today we have Nina Quincy today with us. She is the president of Underbelly Hospitality. Nina, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Perfect, perfect. So tell us a little bit about Underbelly Hospitality.
Underbelly's been around for well over a decade. It was originally founded by Chris Shepard, who's a James Beard Award-winning chef. And it started originally with Underbelly, the actual concept. That was later closed and turned into Georgia James Steak, which is now our flagship for the company. And since then, we have opened, oh gosh, UB Preserve 1/5, closed both, opened numerous concepts since then with Pastore, Comalito, Underbelly Burger, a new location for Georgia James. So we run the gamut from really upscale steakhouse all the way to our burger shop that we created to sort of support Georgia James with all the grind that we have left over.
Okay. So just to be safe, Georgia James is a steakhouse. You have Underbelly Burger, which is in the name, it's burgers. Wild Oats, which is Tex-Mex, correct?
No, so it is Texas.
Okay.
So the cool thing about Texas is everybody, we talk Tex-Mex, we talk barbecue, but
Hmm.
there's some really interesting mixes within the central part of Texas and northern Texas. Like there's a lot of German influence, a
Hmm.
lot, and then there's a lot of French Alsatian influence.
Okay.
So Wild Oats is Texas. It is all the really cool things that have made Texas and all the individual pieces what they are.
Okay. And then you have Pastore, which is Italian kitchen, and then Comolitos, which is taqueria, correct?
Yep, correct.
Perfect. Okay. If somebody wanted to check you guys out, obviously they could go to the individual restaurant websites, but to kind of get an overview, is it just underbellyhospitality.com?
Yes, underbellyhospitality.com. And I would recommend anybody that's coming to Houston and wants to know where to eat, go to our main website because we actually have a page on there um, that lists basically all the really cool restaurants that we think are cool. And
Okay.
and it's not like the really fancy ones either. It's all the little hole in the wall that unless you're from Houston, you're not going to know about them.
Very cool. And you said the main website. Is that in fact the underbellyhospitality.com?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. So tell us a little bit about your journey with the company. You're the president of the company. Did you start recently as the president? Have you kind of moved up through the company? What does that look like?
So I was originally hired in the very start of 2021 in
Okay.
February. And, you know, before I continue it all, to be fair, the job was presented as they believed it to be at that time, and it evolved a lot since. So I was hired to help standardize everything. We had four concepts at the time, and much like all privately owned and chef run and operated restaurants, it was kind of a pirate ship,
Hmm.
and we needed some structure and some policies and procedures, etc. So that's what I was hired to do, as the director of operations. And then over the course of the last, 3.5 years, it's evolved and it became a much bigger job than originally anticipated.
Okay. And what do you attribute the growth of the organization to? And this is going to probably be a little pointed. You've talked about the fact that you had some concepts that started and maybe didn't succeed, or maybe they weren't the right thing, and you have other things that have really kind of grown and taken off. As a whole, um, what do you take from that? What do you attribute the growth to?
Well, I think that there's two things that drive it. On my side, I'd like to grow because we offer more opportunity that way.
Hmm.
We have people that are incredibly talented, and then they're able to kind of move up through the ranks. So as we grow, they get to grow also, which
Hmm.
matters to me a lot.
Sure.
Um, and secondarily, the main ownership are is a real estate investment company. So they're go go go. They're all about growth.
Hmm. Very cool. What about from the perspective of what learnings have you taken from the restaurants that have been successful and those that haven't been? Is it just a matter of location? Is it a matter of the neighborhood and the taste of the neighborhood? What do you attribute that to?
I think it's it's a combination because it really depends on which concept we're talking about
Mhm.
as to what I believe could have gone differently.
Okay.
I think the most recent closure, which was Pastore, um, when we came up with the concept, it was supposed to be open 2 years before it opened. And at the time, there was definitely a lack of that style cuisine within Houston.
Mhm.
There was not a lot of Italian offerings at that time. Over the course of the 2 years that we got delayed, multiple Italian restaurants opened, and three of them within 2 minutes of us.
Okay.
So, and there's enough business to go around. I think that, maybe it was location, maybe the menu was a little bit, um, perhaps a little bit more daring
Sure.
than Houston prefers.
Okay. I think
So,
menus, and I've worked in restaurants and managed restaurants and all that as well. I think menus are very tricky because you need to have menus that are diverse from, you don't need to, but it's helpful to have menus that have diversity from, you mentioned dairy. You want some of those dishes that people are like, oh, I want to go try this because you have foodies that are really interested in that. But then you have my parents that go, or my spouse that goes, and they're like, no, I want chicken parmesan. And it doesn't matter what's on the menu. I want chicken parmesan. And so you kind of have that mix of need, and it's hard to kind of really satisfy everybody with a menu. And so that can be a challenge. So very cool.
yeah, it is.
Tell us a little bit about what have some of your biggest learnings been? You came in really to help provide structure and provide that for the organization, but what have been some of your biggest learnings since coming into the role as director of operations and then ultimately into president?
Wow. It's so funny. I was just talking about this the other day with a friend of mine. Um, there is so much that I've been exposed to a lot over the course of my career,
Mhm.
but there was always this like a support team to assist, right?
Mhm.
So can I write a budget? I can.
Yeah,
But I always had a director of finance to check my work.
yeah,
Can I do a lot of HR things? I can, but I always had a director of HR to catch me before I fell.
yeah.
And we don't have that.
Hmm.
So when I first got hired, if you wanted to apply with our company, you had to walk into a restaurant and ask for an application.
Hmm.
Mind you, this wasn't in 2002. This was
Hmm.
2021.
Hmm.
So getting us online and getting an HR platform put together, I'd never implemented one. I'd been a part of it, but I'd never done it, right? So from start to finish. Same thing with handling all of our business insurance, our medical insurance packages that we have as a company. All of these things that I had never done on my own, I got to learn how to do on my own. So I've definitely been exposed to a lot more than I think I would have ever been um, in a more corporate structured job.
Sure. It's funny, my last role, I was also responsible for implementing an HRIS, an HR
Yeah.
information system. And I kind of went into it thinking, oh, this will be easy, but HRIS is ridiculously complicated. Not only
Yes.
like you think of recruiting and applicant tracking and maybe reviews, and that's it. And that's the section that they don't sell you when you start. Like it's insanely crazy. So anybody that's
Yeah.
going through that, reach out to somebody
It's a
that has it because
3 month process.
yeah.
It's insane. And also, you know what I realized too with that? Um, it's really interesting that it is, I mean, it's all the little things that you don't even know
Mhm.
happen, which is there's this really cool story, and I'm going to butcher it, but back in the Silicon Valley booming days, there
Mhm.
was all these like brilliant tech guys coming up with these awesome ideas, and they would go and they'd be like, hey, I've got this awesome idea, and everybody would go, yes, that is awesome. And then they would form these companies to sell this thing and everybody'd be excited, but then ultimately it would tank. And what
Mhm.
they ended up realizing was the problem wasn't the idea. The problem is that you have all these systems in place to prop up these brilliant minds,
Mhm.
and they don't know what's happening, nor should
Mhm.
they. They shouldn't concern themselves with,
Yeah.
hey, is this job code being routed to the correct GL? Do we have the right business insurance in order to do this? Is our
Yeah.
marketing plan solid? Do we have enough marketing dollars? They don't need to concern themselves. Concern yourself with the product. Salespeople concern themselves with the selling, and then all the admin and all the ops people handle all of those things that nobody really understands
Yeah.
is happening in the background.
Yeah, no, it's kind of insane. And it's not just HRIS, like any system is like that, but typically they're not quite as complicated as an HRIS system. So let's talk a little bit about kind of time management. So being in your role and having multiple restaurants, and I'm sure other concepts that you're working through, how does time management play for you? A lot of times it's a challenge for senior executives. It's a challenge for business owners and leaders. How about for you?
I mean, yes, of course, there's never enough time in the day to do everything I want to do at work and also do everything I want to do at home.
Mhm,
That's the never ending challenge for everybody, no matter the industry. However, what I realize is this is I've allowed, and this is like a post-pandemic shift in my mentality.
mhm,
My list will never go away. It,
mhm,
it just never will. It'll shrink and then five more things will get added. So that list is never ending. And I give myself grace with understanding that and allowing that list to exist.
mhm,
So I just give myself grace there. I understand the things and learning this is the bigger piece is learning what is important and what is urgent. Everything we do is important.
mhm,
Everything. It affects the company. It's all important. However, there are certain things that are urgent. Those things always take precedence, and those are the things that I handle first. Then I can get to everything else. So I
perfect.
think a combination of all of that, and then just little things that I do, like blocking things off on my calendar, making sure that everything goes on my calendar, as simply as walk through with Georgia James with the new contractor or whatever, right? Like, so everything goes on my calendar, and it's a whole lot easier for me to manage my time that way.
Perfect, perfect. So then you mentioned kind of a work-life balance. That's always a challenge for senior executives. It's always a challenge for business owners. Talk about that. I've talked to some business owners and executives that are like, home is home, work is work. The two shall never meet. And I talk to other people, myself included, that I'm like, how do they not meet? Like, they're always together. So talk a little bit about your philosophy and how you manage through those two things.
Well, so first, I think that work-life balance is a fallacy. I disagree with it completely, and I'll tell you why. I'm not two people. I'm one
Mhm,
person. And my work is a big part of who I am.
mhm,
I love what I do. My home life is also a big part of who I am. You can't separate them, and I think that that's where that dissonance happens with all of us. Is that we're like, oh my god, I'm not balancing it. Sometimes work is going to get more of my time, and then other times home is going to get more of my time, and sometimes it flip flops. So I don't necessarily try to separate the two. I just they just exist. And if I start to feel like disconnected from home, then I start to spend more time there.
mhm.
I, I don't think that there's any way to balance the two. I
Yeah.
really don't. And I think that it creates more stress when you start thinking about that and trying to figure out a way to do it. It causes even more stress. So I
Mhm,
don't worry about it. I don't think about it. I just do. I get my work done and then I do the things that bring me joy and make me feel good when I have that free time at home. That's it.
per- Perfect. So I moved here to Houston from New York, and in New York, and I don't think it's just unique to New York, but specifically in New York, at some point in time or other, everybody wants to own a restaurant or a bar. It's just kind of you, yeah, right? And when you get down to it, um, people don't understand how difficult and challenging it is to run a restaurant or to own a restaurant or to own a bar. A bar seems like it should be pretty simple. You have alcohol, you sell alcohol, you close the doors, and you open the doors the next day. Like, but it's not. It's not remotely easy. So, what are some of the misconceptions about running a restaurant that you had coming into this? Because I believe you came from non-food beverage. I know that you had worked for oh,
Hotels?
it was Blue. You worked for
Oh,
multiple.
House of Blues.
There you go.
Yep, Live
You
Nation.
worked
Yeah.
for other restaurants, but you came from a kind of a corporate background. So when you are in this restaurant world, what are some of the misconceptions that you kind of want to pound people with? You're like, no, it's not that easy.
Well, to be fair, House of Blues has an enormous restaurant.
Hmm.
365 seats,
Hmm.
and also a private club and a private lounge and a private bar. So they had a very heavy food and beverage component.
Hmm.
So, in some degree or other, I've always had food or beverage in every job I've had, whether it was the nightclubs in Vegas, the entertainment venues in Nashville, whatever. There's always been a food and beverage component.
Hmm.
I think I I think it's easier to address the why of it, not the what of it. Food and beverage is hard. The reason that we all go into it thinking, oh, this is so easy, anybody can do it, and everybody wants to open a bar or a restaurant because, oh, it's so easy.
Hmm.
It's because we do it every day.
Hmm.
Everybody does. My neighbor cooks in her kitchen every day.
Hmm.
So you're like, well, I do this. I can do this. I cook every day. I make my family dinner. I did Thanksgiving for 30 people. Like I can do this.
Hmm.
And so it feels familiar. Restaurants feel familiar and it
Hmm.
feels like something that you're exposed to regularly day in and day out at home and also like as you're going in as a customer, right? So it feels familiar and it feels easy. But it's like with anything, it's like you don't know what you don't know. It's the Dunning-Kruger, right? So
Hmm.
you don't know what you don't know. And then you get into it and you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah, prep work, what's that? Yeah. Um, so let's talk just very briefly. You mentioned the hiring process. So having worked in restaurants, I know that there is a very different personality between back of house, front of house, wait staff, bartenders, reception and or maitre d'. Each one of those has a very different look and feel, and you want a different personality in many cases in those roles. So, what qualities do you look for in employees? And then how do you kind of foster that productive work environment amongst all of them?
Yeah, well, I think it is very specific to the role. When you have a host, they just need to be incredibly warm, friendly, and genuinely like people, which anybody in food and beverage knows that finding somebody in food and beverage that actually likes people, they're
Hmm.
challenging.
Hmm.
So, bartenders to me are this like hybrid of cook and server because it is, and I always explain it to chefs, especially, and then it kind of clicks. You can
Yeah.
see pieces put together when I say the bar is literally a liquid kitchen.
Hmm.
That's it. They are cooks, they are chefs, they are doing the exact same thing, but the only difference is they're doing it with liquid only, and then a
Hmm.
handful of garnishes, right? So that those people tend to be, I feel like bartenders have this like really amazing work ethic. They're very focused. They're very dedicated to their craft.
Hmm.
So not every server can be a bartender
Right.
um, at all, and not every bartender can be a server because they're very servers are very guest facing.
Yeah.
And so I think that all of those positions are very different. And though you will hire a server who eventually can become a bartender or a host that can move up to server, et cetera, I don't think that it's always interchangeable.
Hmm. Okay. And I would 100% agree with that. Last question. Where do you guys see yourself from a business perspective in 5 years?
Gosh, that's a great question. You know, we're in a process right now of stabilizing.
Mhm.
We grew fast. We weren't supposed to. The growth in all the restaurants that we opened last year, because we opened 4 concepts last year within 5 months. That wasn't supposed to happen.
Okay.
It was supposed to be 4 concepts over the course of 3 years.
Hmm.
And the hospitality gods conspired against us, and permitting and this and that and construction delays and just you name it,
Hmm.
standard, right? Like everything, everybody else's story too. And all of our openings got pushed together. So now it's just a matter of like, we need to stabilize. We need some time. We're reevaluating where we want to go and what we want to do and what's the next thing. I think that ultimately Georgia James is the one that we're really going to focus on and try to grow that one because um, well, she's the flagship and she does well.
Very cool. Well, Nina, I greatly appreciate your time. I'm sure we will check back in a few months and see how everything is going, and go from there. But thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. It was great talking to you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.